are the important evidence when it comes to forensic science investigation. So this is about forensic fingerprints and the other impressions on this topic. The objective of this lecture video is we'll be talking about the history of fingerprint, who are the important pioneers in the fingerprint field. Use of fingerprint has been started in the ancient history itself. So let's see. In 6,000 years old, fingerprints were used on the ultra by northeast China, and it has clear friction ridges impression, which was seen. Then in 1000 BC China, they have seen or they have found the fingerprints on the pottery, and they used to put their fingerprints as seal of the maker. Then in Tang Dynasty, fingerprints were used as seals in China. In the Sung period, the deeds were signed by the means of the fingerprint. Whatever documents or whatever contracts they used to make, they used to take the fingerprints of the person for the deed. Then in the prehistoric era, it was found in the caves of the Canada that they used to put their rich patterns on the sketches as the identification of the painter. Then in Egypt, it was about 3,000 years old. There was a slab of clay which was found in the tomb of the king in Egypt. In ancient China, clay makers used to take their thumbprints on the clay seals. Apart from that, we had a Persian physician named Rashid. He has collected Chinese practice of identifying people through fingerprints. So he commented on that by collecting all those collections and named him as Jamil Tawarik. Then in India, fingerprints were used, the whole palm print known as punja, for the identification purpose, and they have embossed those on the clay and seals during Indus Valley civilization. In 17th century, the scientist named Wu, he stated that innumerable little ridges of equal size in the ends of the first joints of the finger. He also mentioned about the sweat pores, epidermal ridges and their arrangements. Apart from that, he also mentioned the sweat pores which was present on the hand as little fountains. Then another scientist named as Whitlow, he has written a book on human anatomy, and over there he incorporated the diagram of friction ridges and pore structure, but he also failed to mention about the individuality of the friction ridges. After that, Marcello Martigny, he referred about the function, form and structure of the friction skin as a touchable organ. Then also he mentioned about the spirals and loops in the fingerprints, but he also forgot to mention the reference to its importance. Then Thomas Wick used fingerprint in the form of stamp. Evangelista Patinje, he has written a thesis. In that thesis, he mentioned about the fingerprint and classified the fingerprints into 9 principal configuration groups and assigned names to each one of them. But he also never mentioned anything regarding individuality of the wrist structure and their use in personal identification. Then we have Greek scientist William Herschel. In 1858, he was the chief magistrate of the Hooghly district, Jandipur, India. He was the first person to use fingerprints on the native contracts of the friction ridges. Henry Pauls, he examined the fingerprints in depth. He also mentioned that fingerprints can be classified and also the ridges are distinctive. He also maintained that fingerprints are useful in medical legal studies as the photographs of people may change but friction ridge never change. He also emphasized apprehending criminals by locating fingerprint at crime scene. Coleman was the first researcher who made a mention regarding formation of friction ridges in the embryos and topographical physical stressor that may have been part of their growth. He also identified the presence and location of polar pads on human hands and foot. Thomas Taylor has made an effort to identify criminals, specifically the murderer, by comparing the marks of the hand left upon any object with impressions in wax taken from the hands of suspected persons. Sir Francis Galton, one of the important pioneers in the fingerprint field, he published a book entitled Fingerprints in 1892, in which he included the first classification system for fingerprints, which was scientifically proved that fingerprints do not change over the course of an individual's lifetime, and no two fingerprints are exactly the same. Apart from that, according to his calculations, the odds of two individual fingerprints being the same were 1 in 64 billion. He was also responsible for identifying the rich characteristics, which is also called as minutiae, that are responsible for establishing the supremacy of fingerprints over Bertillon's anthropometric method of identification in 1901. He also established the primary means of personal identification. Finally, is June Vekitic. He was from Argentina. He set up his own equipment for taking criminals' prints in Argentina. In 1991, he independently worked out a fingerprint classification system and was filing criminals' fingerprint using his new system, which was practically used in solving the first ever murder case that was named as Roger's murder in 1892. By 1896, Argentina became the first country in the world to abolish anthropometry and file criminal records solely by the fingerprint classification. Sir Edward Henry, another pioneer in the field of fingerprint. In 1891, he added taking of the left thumb impression to each anthropometric file card. Then, in 1894, in India, he instructed that all the 10 fingers of each person to be printed and added to the anthropometric card. For that work, he assigned two Bengali officers, Khan Bahadur Azizul Haq and Rahib Bahadur Premchand Bose, and told them to study the classification problem. Eventually, they all succeeded in setting up a classification system with 1024 primary positions and secondary breakdowns in each. Then in 1897, fingerprints were adopted as the official method for the identification of criminals in British India, as he was working in India at that time. In December 1900, the Belko Committee recommended that the fingerprints of the criminals be taken and classified by the Indian system. The also recommendations were implemented in 1901 and the Indian system eventually replaced anthropometry. Subsequently, systems of Henry and Vekitic formed the basis of most of the 10-digit classification used at the present time. Dr. Edmund Locard, as we all know, has given the principle of exchange of principle, also known as Locard exchange of principle. He also established the science of fluoroscopy. Then Salil K. Chatterjee in 1962 coined the term edgeoscopy, which means in that particular field we can use the rich edges in concert with the other friction-rich formation to establish the individuality. He also observed the different shapes on the friction-rich edge that tended to reappear frequently and renamed them. Having an understanding of this relevance of edge shapes enhances comparison and improves the chances of establishing the. There are some important pioneers in the field of fingerprint: Raman Quinton, John Perkin J, William Herschel, Dr. Henry Paul, Sir Francis Galton, and Sir Edward Richard Henry. These are some references which can be used for the further information and